Guys who dated someone out of your league, how did you do it? I was a 19-year-old community college dropout working at GameStop when Vivian walked into my life. She was everything I wasn't, studying pre-med at the university, drove a BMW her parents bought her, and had this way of speaking that made even ordering coffee sound elegant. I was living in my mom's basement, surviving on ramen and energy drinks. She came in looking for a gift for her little brother. While I explained the difference between PlayStation and Xbox games, she actually listened. Most customers just wanted to get out as fast as possible, but she asked follow-up questions and laughed at my terrible jokes about controller drift. When she left, I figured that was it. Then she came back the next week. This time, she wasn't buying anything. She just wanted to talk. We discussed everything. Her stress about organic chemistry, my theories about game design, her family's expectations. For 3 months, these conversations were the highlight of my week. My coworker Danny thought I was delusional. "Dude, girls like that don't date guys like us," he'd say. "She's probably just being nice because you work here." But something felt different. The way she'd light up when she saw me. How she'd remember details about my week. When she invited me to get coffee outside the mall, my hands shook so badly I could barely text back, "Yes." At the coffee shop, she told me about her family. Old money, expectations, pressure to marry within their social circle. I told her about mine. Dad left when I was 12, mom working 2 jobs, dreams of making games someday, but no clear path there. "You're different from the guys I usually meet," she said. "You actually listen. You don't try to impress me with things you own or connections your family has." We started dating in secret. She'd pick me up in her car blocks away from my house. We'd drive to parks in neighboring towns where nobody would recognize her. She'd bring takeout from expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, and I'd bring homemade sandwiches Mom taught me to make. For 6 months, it was perfect. She'd sneak me into university parties where I felt completely out of place but tried to blend in. I'd introduce her to my world. Late-night gaming sessions, dive bars where my friends hung out, the diner where Mom worked weekend shifts. Then, her parents found out. I still don't know exactly how. Maybe someone saw us together. Maybe she left something that gave it away. All I know is that one Tuesday, she didn't show up at our usual meeting spot. She didn't answer my text for 3 days. When she finally called, her voice was different. Distant. "My family knows about us," she said. "They want to meet you." That should have been good news, right? Meeting the parents is supposed to be a milestone. But something in her tone made my stomach drop. The dinner was at their house. Not a house, really, but a mansion with a circular driveway and actual columns. I borrowed my mom's car and bought a shirt from Target, hoping it looked expensive enough. Her father answered the door in a suit that probably cost more than my mom made in a month. Her mother wore pearls and a smile that never reached her eyes. They were polite, terrifyingly polite. Over dinner, served by actual hired help, they asked about my background, my education, my career aspirations. I tried to be honest without sounding pathetic. Yes, I was working retail. No, I didn't have a college degree yet. Yes, I hoped to work in game design someday. They nodded and smiled and asked follow-up questions that felt like tiny knives. After dinner, her father asked to speak with me privately in his study. That's when everything changed. Her father's study looked like something from a movie. Leather-bound books, dark wood paneling, a globe that probably cost more than my mom's car. He poured himself a scotch and didn't offer me one. "Let me be direct," he said, settling into his chair like a king on a throne. "My daughter is infatuated with you. But infatuation passes. What doesn't pass is the damage you could do to her future." I sat there like an idiot, not knowing how to respond. He continued, pulling out a folder from his desk drawer. "I've done some research on your family. Your father abandoned you when you were 12. Your mother works at Pete's Diner on weekends and cleans office buildings during the week. She's behind on her mortgage payments and has significant medical debt from her diabetes medication." Each word hit like a physical blow. How did he know about Mom's medical issues? "Your credit score is abysmal," he continued, sliding papers across the desk. "You have no education beyond high school, no prospects, no way to provide the life my daughter deserves. She's destined for medical school, a career that will put her in contact with successful, educated men who can match her ambition." He leaned forward, his eyes cold. "But I'm not unreasonable," he said, sliding the folder across the desk. Inside was a check made out to me for $75,000, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. Enough to pay off Mom's medical debt, fix her car, maybe even help me go back to school. "This is what I'm offering you to walk away," he continued. "Take it. Disappear from her life, and everyone wins. She can find someone appropriate. You can improve your situation. Clean break." I stared at the check, my hands trembling. This could change everything for my family. Mom wouldn't have to work herself to death. She could afford her medication without rationing pills. I could actually afford college, but it meant losing the one person who made me feel like I mattered. "What if I say no?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. "Then things become complicated. I sit on the board of directors for 3 banks in this city. I have connections with every major employer. I play golf with the dean of admissions at the community college. It would be unfortunate if doors started closing for you and your family." He paused, letting that sink in. "Your mother's employer, for instance. The cleaning company she works for has a contract with my firm. That contract comes up for renewal next month. These things can be..." Unpredictable. The threat was crystal clear. He wasn't just threatening me, he was threatening Mom's livelihood. And there's another matter, he said, pulling out another document. This appears to be a citation for possession of marijuana from when you were 17. Expunged, of course, but these records have a way of resurfacing during background checks. Your current employer might find that interesting. My blood ran cold. That arrest had been a stupid mistake. Holding a joint for a friend at a party. The charges were dropped after I completed community service and the record was supposed to be sealed. How did you get that? I asked. I have resources, he said simply. Resources that could make your life very comfortable or very difficult depending on the choices you make tonight. I need time to think, I said. He nodded. 24 hours. And remember, Vivian doesn't need to know about this conversation. As far as she's concerned, you simply realized you two weren't compatible. I drove home in a daze, the check burning in my pocket like a guilty secret. Mom was watching late-night TV, still in her work uniform from the diner. Her feet were soaked in a bucket of warm water. Her ankles had been swelling lately. How was dinner, honey? She asked, not taking her eyes off the screen. Fine, I lied. Those people seem nice, she said. Vivian's got good manners. Raised right. Yeah, I said. She is. Mom looked at me then. Really looked. You okay? You seem upset. I wanted to tell her everything. About the check. About the threats. About how I was being forced to choose between love and survival. But she had enough problems without carrying mine too. Just tired, I said. You've been working too hard, she said. All those extra shifts at the store. You need to take care of yourself. If only she knew I was about to receive more money than she'd see in 2 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Vivian's laugh, the way she'd scrunch her nose when concentrating, how she'd made me believe I could be more than just another burnout from the wrong side of town, the way she'd hold my hand while we walked, not caring who might see us together. But I also thought about Mom's arthritis, how she winced when she thought I wasn't looking, about the medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter that she tried to hide from me, about the dreams I'd given up because college seemed impossible, about the future her father was threatening to destroy. I pulled out the check and stared at it. $75,000. It was more than Mom made in 2 years. Around 3 in the morning, I heard her get up to use the bathroom. She was trying to be quiet, but I could hear her sharp intake of breath when she put weight on her swollen feet. She'd been on them for 16 hours straight. I thought about her working 2 jobs at 53, coming home exhausted every night but still asking about my day, still making sure there was food in the fridge even when money was tight, still believing I could make something of myself even when I'd given up on college. I thought about what would happen if her father followed through on his threats, if she lost her cleaning job, if I couldn't find work anywhere in the city, if that old arrest record somehow surfaced and destroyed what little future I had. That's when I made my decision. The next morning, I called Vivian and asked her to meet me at our usual spot, a park bench overlooking the lake where we'd had our first real conversation. She showed up wearing a sundress I'd never seen before, looking nervous like she already knew something was wrong. We need to talk, I said. She sat beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive her mother had probably bought her. I sat there looking at her perfect face, trying to memorize it, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the small scar above her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off her bike as a kid, the freckle on her neck that she was self-conscious about but I thought was beautiful. Then I lied my ass off. I told her I'd been thinking about our future and realized we were too different, that I needed to focus on getting my life together before I could be with anyone, that it wouldn't be fair to either of us to keep pretending this could work. You're breaking up with me, she said. It wasn't a question. I think it's for the best, I said, hating myself with every word. She didn't cry at first. She just stared at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. This doesn't make sense, she said. Yesterday you told me you loved me. You said we'd figure everything out together. People say a lot of things, I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. That's when the tears started. Is this because of what my parents said to you last night? She asked. My heart nearly stopped. No, I said. This is my decision. She searched my face for the truth I couldn't give her. I love you, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why I have to do this. What does that even mean? She demanded, her voice rising. If you love someone, you don't just walk away because things get complicated. Sometimes love isn't enough, I said, repeating her father's words. She stood up abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. You're lying, she said. Something happened at dinner. What did they say to you? Nothing, I insisted. They were perfectly polite. My parents are never perfectly polite to people they don't approve of, she said. They're cruel. They make people feel small and worthless until they disappear. She was right, but I couldn't admit it. This is what I want, I said. She studied my face one more time, then nodded slowly. Fine, she said. If this is what you want, then I guess we're done. She started to walk away, then turned back. You know what hurts the most? She said. It's not that you're leaving. It's that you think so little of me that you won't even tell me the truth about why. She left without another word, and I sat on that bench for 3 hours afterward, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. But when I got home and saw Mom counting pills to make them last longer, I knew I'd made the only choice I could live with. I deposited the check the next day. The bank teller looked at the amount twice before processing it. I paid off Mom's medical debt, caught up on the mortgage, and put the rest into savings for my education. When Mom asked where the money came from, I told her I'd been saving tips and had gotten a small loan from the bank. The lie came easier than I expected. I was getting good at lying. 3 months later, I used the money to enroll in a coding boot camp. The application process was brutal. Aptitude tests, interviews, portfolio reviews. But somehow I made it in. The boot camp was intense. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months. I threw myself into it completely. Partly because I wanted to succeed, and partly because staying busy meant I didn't have time to think about Vivienne. My instructor was a guy named Marcus who'd worked at Google before starting his own company. He was tough but fair, and he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. "You've got an intuitive understanding of systems," he told me after I debugged a particularly complex problem. "Most people have to learn to think this way. For you, it's natural." The other students came from all different backgrounds. There was Patricia, a former teacher who decided to change careers after 20 years in education. David, a military veteran using his GI benefits to learn a new skill. Sarah, a recent college graduate who'd majored in art, but realized she needed something more practical. We formed study groups, stayed late working on projects together, celebrated each other's breakthroughs, and commiserated over debugging sessions that lasted until dawn. For the first time since losing Vivienne, I felt like I belonged somewhere. 6 months after graduation, I landed an entry-level programming job at a tech startup downtown. The salary was more than Mom and I had ever imagined. The company was small, only 15 employees, but they were building something revolutionary in mobile gaming. My first day, I met the founders, 2 guys in their 30s who'd left cushy corporate jobs to chase their vision of games that could actually make a difference in people's lives. Not just mindless entertainment, but interactive stories that could help players process emotions, overcome challenges, learn empathy. This is exactly what I dreamed of doing back when I was stocking shelves at GameStop and fantasizing about a career in game design. Within 2 years, I was making decent money and had moved Mom into a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. She cried when she saw the place. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, windows that faced east so she could grow herbs on the windowsill. "You've done good, baby," she said, hugging me tight. "Your father would be proud." It was the first time she'd mentioned him in years without bitterness in her voice. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that I'd improved both our lives, that sometimes love isn't enough when the world is determined to keep people in their assigned places. But I never stopped thinking about her. I'd catch glimpses of her around the city sometimes. Once at a coffee shop near the university, hunched over medical textbooks with highlighters and index cards spread across the table. She looked stressed but determined, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail I remembered from when we'd studied together. Another time at a charity gala my company sponsored, she was there with her parents, wearing a designer dress and a smile that looked painted on. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making conversation with donors and board members like she'd been born to it. Each time I'd duck out before she could see me, I didn't trust myself to maintain the lie if we came face to face. The startup grew rapidly. We released 3 games in my first 2 years, each more successful than the last. I was promoted to senior developer, then lead programmer, then creative director. My ideas were shaping the direction of the company, but success felt hollow without someone to share it with. I tried dating. Jennifer from marketing was sweet and funny and completely wrong for me. Maria from the coffee shop down the street was gorgeous and intelligent, but talked too much. Ashley from my coding bootcamp was perfect on paper, but kissed like a fish. None of them were Vivienne. None of them understood my references or laughed at my terrible jokes or challenged me to be better than I thought I could be. 2 years passed. I was working late one Friday evening when my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local medical student wins prestigious research award for work in pediatric cardiology. The photo showed Vivienne in a white coat, holding a plaque and smiling for the camera. She looked older, more confident, but still beautiful. The article described her groundbreaking research into non-invasive treatments for children born with heart defects. I stared at that photo for 20 minutes, pride and heartbreak warring in my chest. She was becoming everything she dreamed of being, everything her parents had always known she could become. I wondered if she ever thought about the boy who'd loved her when she was just a pre-med student with big dreams and no idea how to achieve them. That night, I found myself at a bar near the university, nursing a beer and hoping I might catch a glimpse of her. Pathetic, but grief makes you do stupid things. Instead, I overheard 2 medical students talking about her. "Vivienne's engaged," one of them said, "to that guy Alexander Morrison from Harvard. His family owns half of Boston." My heart stopped. "They're perfect together," the other one replied. "Both brilliant, both from the right families. They'll probably cure cancer and solve world hunger together." I finished my beer and went home to an empty apartment. The wedding announcement appeared in the society pages 3 months later. I didn't go, but I thought about it. Thought about standing up during the ceremony and telling her the truth about why I really left. About confessing that I'd spent 2 years trying to become the man I thought she deserved, only to realize she'd loved me as I was. But fairy tales are for kids, and real life is messier than the movies. Instead, I threw myself into work. I stayed late every night, took on extra projects, anything to keep my mind occupied. My boss noticed my dedication and offered me equity in the company. With the potential payout, I was able to buy Mom a small house in a quiet neighborhood. She cried when I handed her the keys. "You've made something of yourself," she said. "Against all odds, you've made something beautiful." I wanted to tell her it felt like fool's gold, that all the success in the world couldn't fill the hole Vivian had left behind. I kept some of the money from her father in that savings account, watching it grow with compound interest. Every month I'd consider spending it, but it felt tainted somehow. Blood money earned from breaking my own heart. The company went public in my 4th year. My equity made me wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined growing up. I bought Mom a bigger house with a garden where she could grow the vegetables she'd always wanted. I set up a trust fund to cover her medical expenses for life. But money couldn't buy back the years I'd lost with Vivian, couldn't undo the choice I'd made to prioritize security over love. 5 years passed. I founded my own game development company with 2 friends from the startup. We specialized in mobile games with meaningful narratives, stories about overcoming adversity, finding courage in dark times, learning to forgive yourself for past mistakes. Our breakout hit was called Second Chances, a game about a young couple separated by circumstances beyond their control who find their way back to each other years later. Players guided them through the challenges of rebuilding trust, learning to communicate, choosing love over fear. Critics called it a mature exploration of love and loss. Gaming magazines praised its emotional depth and authentic dialogue. It won several awards and sold millions of copies worldwide. I never told anyone it was autobiographical. Mom's health had stabilized with proper medical care. She'd even started dating a kind widower named Frank who treated her like she was precious. He brought her flowers every week, took her dancing at the senior center, and listened to her stories about raising me alone like they were the most fascinating tales he'd ever heard. Watching them together, seeing how gentle and attentive he was, I understood what real love looked like between equals, how different it was from the desperate, all-consuming passion I'd felt for Vivienne. Their love was steady, comfortable, built on shared values and genuine friendship rather than the intense chemistry that had defined my relationship with Vivian. I tried to convince myself that what Vivian and I had shared was just young love, idealized in memory, that we would have burned out eventually, consumed by our own intensity. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if we might have found our way to something deeper given the chance. 7 years after our breakup, I was at a tech conference in Chicago when I overheard 2 doctors talking at the hotel bar. One of them mentioned a Dr. Vivian Morrison, who was doing groundbreaking research in pediatric cardiology at Children's Hospital. The name hit me like a lightning bolt. Morrison. She'd taken her husband's name. I spent that night Googling everything I could find about her. She'd graduated medical school summa cum laude, completed her residency at Johns Hopkins, and was now leading a research team focused on developing less invasive surgical techniques for children born with complex heart defects. The articles described her as brilliant, dedicated, and compassionate. In the photos, she looked older, but beautiful, her smile more confident than I remembered. She wore her hair shorter now, styled in a way that made her look professional and approachable. One article mentioned her husband briefly, Dr. Alexander Morrison, a plastic surgeon who specialized in reconstructive work for children with birth defects. They seemed like the perfect power couple, both dedicated to healing kids who needed it most. A sidebar mentioned their involvement in various charities, their donations to medical research, their work with organizations that provided free surgery to children in developing countries. They were changing the world together, exactly the kind of life her parents had always envisioned for her. I tried to be happy for her. She'd achieved everything she'd dreamed of and more. She was making a real difference in the world, exactly what she'd always wanted to do. But late at night, alone in my success, I couldn't help but wonder if she was truly happy or just living the life everyone expected her to live. My company continued to grow. We employed 50 people now, had offices in 3 cities, and were working on projects that pushed the boundaries of what mobile games could achieve. We'd partnered with therapists to create games that helped children process trauma. We'd worked with educators to develop learning tools disguised as entertainment. I was proud of what we'd built. We were proving that games could be more than just escapism. They could be tools for healing, growth, and connection. But success felt incomplete without someone to share it with. I dated other people over the years, smart, accomplished women who challenged me intellectually and supported my ambitions. But none of them ever felt like home the way Vivian had. I started seeing a therapist in my 8th year without her. Dr. Chen was a middle-aged woman who specialized in helping people process complicated grief. You're mourning not just the relationship, but the version of yourself that existed within it, she told me during one of our sessions. The person you were when you were with her. Young, hopeful, unburdened by the weight of practical considerations. That person died when you chose security over love. She was right. The boy who'd believed love could conquer anything had died in her father's study the night I took that check. What remained was a successful man who'd learned to protect himself at the cost of his capacity for joy. But you're still capable of that kind of love, Dr. Chen continued. The question is whether you're willing to be vulnerable enough to pursue it again. I wasn't sure I was. Vulnerability had nearly destroyed my family once. Why risk it again? My answer came sooner than I expected. 3 more years passed. My company had gone international. We had offices in London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. I was invited to speak at conferences around the world about the intersection of technology and emotional storytelling. On the outside, I had everything a person could want: financial security, professional recognition, the respect of my peers. Mom was healthy and happy with Frank. I owned a beautiful house with a view of the lake where Vivian and I used to walk, but I felt like I was living someone else's life.
Last month, I was at a coffee shop near my office when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around to find Vivienne standing there, no wedding ring on her finger, looking more like the girl I'd fallen in love with than the polished woman she'd become. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs. She was wearing scrubs under a winter coat, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired but beautiful, more real than in any of the professional photos I'd found online. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We found a corner table away from the afternoon crowd. She ordered black coffee. She used to drink it with cream and sugar, but people change. "I heard about your company," she said. "Congratulations. Mom sends me newspaper clippings whenever you're mentioned. Your mom keeps track of me?" She smiled sadly. "She always liked you. Said you were the only one of my boyfriends who remembered to ask about her garden. I'd forgotten about that. Vivian's mother had prize-winning roses that she tended obsessively. I'd always made sure to compliment them when I visited. How is she?" I asked. "Disappointed in me mostly," Vivian said. "Dad had a heart attack 2 years ago. Made her realize how much time they'd wasted trying to control my life instead of just enjoying it." "I'm sorry," I said. "About your father. He survived," she said. "But it changed him. Made him more human somehow. He actually apologized to me last Christmas for interfering in my relationships. That must have been surreal." "You have no idea," she said. 31 years of trying to earn his approval, and suddenly he's telling me he was wrong to push so hard. She took a sip of her coffee, gathering courage for whatever came next. "I'm divorced," she said quietly. "Has been final for 6 months now." "I'm sorry," I said, though part of me wasn't sorry at all. "Don't be," she said. "It was a long time coming. We were never really compatible, just suitable. Alexander is a good man, but we were living parallel lives instead of building one together. What happened?" She was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. "He wanted me to scale back my research, focus on private practice where I could make more money and have a more predictable schedule. Said we needed to start thinking about having children and building wealth for their future." "That doesn't sound unreasonable," I said, though everything in me was screaming that he was wrong. "It wasn't," she said. "But when I tried to picture that life, the big house in the suburbs, the country club memberships, the charity galas where we'd smile for cameras and write checks to feel important, all I could think about was how empty it felt, how much it looked like my parents' marriage." She looked directly at me then. "Do you remember what you used to say about making games?" she asked. "How you wanted to create stories that mattered, that made people feel less alone." I nodded. "That's how I feel about medicine," she said. "I don't want to just treat patients. I want to heal them. I want to solve problems that seem impossible." Alexander thought that was naive, said I needed to be more practical about my career goals. He was wrong, I said. "Maybe," she said, "but it took me 8 years to figure that out." We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I need you to know that you were right," she said, "about us being from different worlds, but you were wrong about which world I belonged in." "I don't understand." "I spent 15 years trying to be the person my parents wanted me to be," she said. "Perfect grades, perfect husband, perfect life, and I was miserable. The only time I ever felt like myself was when I was with you, Vivian." "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I know too much has happened. Too much time has passed. I just needed you to know that leaving me was the wrong choice for the wrong reasons." "What would have been the right choice?" I asked. "Trusting me," she said. "Trusting us, fighting for what we had instead of deciding I was too good for you." "Your father threatened my family," I said. "I couldn't risk that." "My father was a bully who preyed on your insecurity," she said. "If you'd told me the truth, we could have faced him together. Instead, you decided for both of us that we couldn't work. She was right, and we both knew it. I've spent the last 8 years learning to trust my own judgment," she continued. "Learning to fight for what I want instead of accepting what other people think I deserve." "And what do you want?" I asked. She looked at me with the same intensity I remembered from when we were young. "A second chance," she said. The words hung in the air between us. 11 years of separation, 2 different lives, careers we'd built without each other. It should have been impossible. But looking at her face, seeing the vulnerability she was brave enough to show me, I felt the same electricity I'd felt when we were 19 and stupid and believed love could conquer everything. "I don't know if we can go back," I said. "I don't want to go back," she said. "I want to go forward, as the people we are now, not the kids we used to be." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I know you probably think I'm crazy," she said, showing up out of nowhere after all this time, but I had to try. I had to know if what we had was real or just something I've been carrying around because I never got closure. "It was real," I said. "The realest thing I've ever felt. So where does that leave us?" I looked at her, really looked. The girl I'd fallen in love with was still there, but she'd grown into a woman who knew her own mind. Someone who'd fought for her dreams and won. Someone who'd walked away from a life that looked perfect on paper because it didn't feel right. Someone brave enough to risk rejection for the chance at something true. "It leaves us with a choice," I said. "We can walk away again, both knowing we tried. Or we can see what happens when we stop being afraid of wanting too much." She smiled then.
the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she'd sat down. "I'm tired of being afraid," she said. "Me too," I said. We talked until the coffee shop closed, sharing 11 years of separate stories. She told me about medical school, about the patients who changed her perspective, about the research that kept her up at night because she was so close to a breakthrough that could save children's lives. She told me about her marriage, how Alexander was kind and intelligent but never really saw her, how he'd loved the idea of her more than the reality, how she'd spent 8 years trying to become the wife he wanted instead of being the woman she was. She told me about the divorce proceedings that had dragged on for 2 years because Alexander couldn't understand why she was throwing away their life together, how her parents had begged her to reconsider, warning her that successful, attractive men like Alexander didn't come along every day, how she'd finally realized that she'd rather be alone than spend another day pretending to be someone she wasn't. I told her about building my company, about the games we'd made, about the letters we received from players who said our stories had helped them through difficult times, about the responsibility I felt to create meaningful content in an industry that often prioritized profit over purpose. I told her about Mom's relationship with Frank and how it had shown me what healthy love looked like, about the therapy sessions that had helped me understand why I'd been so afraid of vulnerability, about the years of wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to fight for us. When the coffee shop started stacking chairs, we moved to a bar down the street, then another one when that closed. Finally, we ended up on a bench by the lake. Not our old bench, but close enough. The city lights reflected on the water, and for a moment it felt like we were 19 again, full of plans and possibilities. But we weren't 19 anymore. We were adults who'd made mistakes and learned from them. Adults who'd built lives we were proud of independently. Adults who were brave enough to risk everything they'd accomplished for the chance at something better. "There's something I need to tell you," I said as we watched the last ferry of the night cross the lake. She turned to face me, her expression serious. "I never spent your father's money," I said. "Well, not all of it. I used some for school, some to help Mom, but most of it has been sitting in an account for 11 years, earning interest. Why? Because it never felt like mine," I said. "It was the price of losing you. I always planned to give it back someday." She was quiet for a long time. "How much is it now?" she asked. "With compound interest?" "About 120,000. She laughed. Actually laughed. "What's funny?" I asked. "That's exactly how much I've donated to scholarship funds for low-income students over the past 5 years," she said. "I've been trying to atone for my father's sins by helping kids who remind me of you. So we've both been carrying around guilt about money we never wanted in the first place," I said. "Apparently so." We sat in comfortable silence, processing the irony. "I should go," she said around midnight. "I have surgery at 6. "Of course you do," I said. "Saving lives and all that." "Someone has to," she said, smiling. "Can I see you again?" I asked. "I'd like that," she said. She kissed my cheek before she left, a whisper of contact that sent electricity through my entire body. "I want to tell you that everything worked out perfectly after that we picked up where we left off and lived happily ever after. But real life is more complicated than fairy tales. We started slowly. Coffee once a week, then twice. Dinner at quiet restaurants where we could talk for hours without interruption. Long walks through the city, rediscovering places that held memories of our younger selves. She came to my office and met my team. They were fascinated by her work, asking dozens of questions about pediatric surgery and medical innovation. She fit seamlessly into their discussions about using technology to solve complex problems. I went to the hospital and watched her interact with patients. She had a gift for explaining complicated medical procedures in ways that made children feel brave instead of scared. Parents trusted her instantly. Her colleagues clearly respected her expertise and leadership. We were taking it slow, learning each other again. She had trust issues from her marriage, and I had abandonment issues from 11 years of regret. We were both stubborn and successful and used to being independent, but we were trying. The first time she stayed over at my house, we lay in bed talking until sunrise. She traced the scars on my hands from years of stress-related scratching and told me about the nightmares she'd had during her divorce. We shared the broken parts of ourselves that we'd kept hidden from everyone else. Mom loved having her back in our lives. She kept saying she always knew we'd find our way back to each other, like she was personally responsible for our reunion. Frank welcomed her warmly, treating her like the daughter he'd never had. Her parents were adjusting. Her mother invited me to their anniversary party, which I took as a good sign. She mentioned how much they regretted the way they'd handled things when we were young, how they'd let fear override their better judgment. Her father was more difficult. Our first conversation after the reunion was stilted and awkward, but gradually, he began to see me as the man I'd become rather than the boy I'd been. He asked about my company, my goals, my plans for the future. He seemed genuinely interested in my answers. One evening, about 3 months after we'd reconnected, he asked to speak with me privately. My heart raced, remembering that night in his study 11 years earlier. This time, we sat on his back porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset over his perfectly manicured garden. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "What I did to you was unconscionable. I used my power to manipulate a young man who was only guilty of loving my daughter. I didn't know what to say. I convinced myself I was protecting her," he continued, "but I was really protecting my own ego. my image of what her life should look like. I robbed both of you of the chance to choose your own path. He paused, struggling with the words. I've watched her for 11 years, trying to become the person I thought she should be. She was successful, accomplished, everything I'd dreamed of. But she was never happy, not the way she was with you. Thank you for saying that, I said. I can't undo what I did, he said. But I can promise you that I'll never interfere in your relationship again. You've proven that you're worthy of her in every way that matters. It felt like an apology wrapped in a blessing. 6 months in, we had our first real fight. She wanted to move in together, and I was terrified. Not of commitment, but of losing my independence again. Of becoming so wrapped up in loving her that I forgot who I was without her. We spent a week barely speaking, both too proud to make the first move toward reconciliation. Finally, she showed up at my office with takeout from the Thai restaurant we'd discovered on our third date. We're both idiots, she said, setting the food on my desk. We're so afraid of repeating our past mistakes that we're creating new ones. She was right. We'd been so careful to protect ourselves that we'd forgotten how to be vulnerable with each other. We talked for hours that night about our fears and expectations and the ways we'd changed since we were young. We established boundaries and ground rules for moving forward. We agreed to see a couples therapist to help us navigate the complexity of rebuilding a relationship with so much history. A year in, we moved in together, not to her place or mine, but to a new apartment that belonged to both of us. We chose the furniture together, painted the walls colors we both loved, created a space that reflected our shared vision of the future. Living together was an adjustment. She was messier than I remembered, leaving medical journals scattered across every surface and forgetting to put dishes in the dishwasher. I was more rigid than she expected, needing routines and systems to feel secure, but we learned to compromise. She organized her research materials into designated areas. I relaxed my need for perfect order. We found rhythms that worked for both of us. The therapy helped. Dr. Martinez was a no-nonsense woman who called us out on our defensive patterns and helped us develop healthier ways of communicating. She taught us to fight fair, to ask for what we needed instead of expecting the other person to guess. Our second year together brought new challenges. Vivian was offered a position at a research hospital in Boston, a dream job that would put her at the forefront of pediatric cardiac innovation. The opportunity was everything she'd worked toward her entire career, but it would mean leaving everything we'd rebuilt together. We spent weeks agonizing over the decision. I could move my company anywhere. Technology allowed for remote work and digital collaboration, but asking me to uproot my life for her career felt too much like the old dynamic where one person's dreams mattered more than the others. In the end, she turned down the position. I was relieved, but also guilty. What if I was holding her back the way her father had held me back? What if love was once again becoming a cage instead of a foundation? You're not holding me back, she assured me when I voiced these concerns. I'm choosing us. There's a difference. But I could see the wistfulness in her eyes when she talked about the research they were doing in Boston. The groundbreaking surgeries she wouldn't be part of, the colleagues she wouldn't work alongside. 6 months later, I surprised her with a business plan I'd been working on in secret, a proposal to expand my company's work into medical gaming applications, virtual reality training programs for surgeons, therapeutic games for children recovering from major surgery, educational tools for medical students. We could build something together, I told her. Your expertise in pediatric medicine combined with our technology could revolutionize how children experience medical care. Her eyes lit up with the same excitement I'd seen when she talked about her research. The Boston position opened up again the following year. This time, when she was offered the job, I had a counteroffer ready. What if we both went? I asked. What if we moved the medical gaming division of my company to Boston and you took the research position? We could finally stop choosing between love and ambition. She cried when I presented the proposal to her. Happy tears, she assured me, but it took several minutes before she could speak. "You'd do that for me?" she asked. "I'd do that for us," I said. "We're not 19 anymore. We don't have to choose between love and career. We can build a life that includes both." The move to Boston was complicated, but invigorating. I opened a satellite office near the hospital where Vivian worked. We collaborated on projects that combined her medical knowledge with my team's technical expertise. Our first joint venture was a virtual reality program that helped children prepare for heart surgery. Instead of being terrified by the unknown, kids could explore a cartoon version of their own heart, meet the animated characters who would help fix it, and practice breathing exercises in a calming virtual environment. The program reduced pre-surgical anxiety by 60% in our pilot study. Children who used the VR preparation were calmer during procedures, recovered faster, and reported less trauma from the experience. We presented our findings at medical conferences around the world. Hospitals began adopting our technology. Other developers started creating similar programs for different types of procedures. We were changing how medicine worked, one innovation at a time. 3 years into our Boston life, Vivienne came home from work with news that changed everything. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. We'd been trying for 6 months, but somehow I wasn't prepared for the reality of it. We were going to be parents, together. After everything we'd been through, we were going to create a life that was part of both of us. I cried. Actually cried. 11 years of wondering what our children might have looked like, and now we were going to find out. The pregnancy was difficult. Vivian's work schedule was demanding, and she struggled with severe morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. I took over most of the household responsibilities and learned to cook the few foods she could keep down. We hired additional staff for both our companies so we could reduce our workloads. We took childbirth classes, read parenting books, and turned our spare bedroom into a nursery painted in soft yellow and green. Mom flew out from Chicago to help when the baby was born. Frank came with her, carrying flowers and a hand-carved rocking chair he'd made in his workshop. They were both in tears when they met their granddaughter, Elena Rose, named for my grandmother and Vivian's middle name. She was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and Vivian's dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Holding her for the first time, I understood what people meant when they talked about love at first sight. This tiny person was part of me and part of the woman I'd loved since I was 19. She was proof that sometimes, against all odds, broken things can be made whole again. The first year of parenthood tested us in ways we hadn't expected. Sleep deprivation made us irritable. The constant demands of caring for a newborn left little time or energy for each other. We found ourselves snapping over small things, forgetting to show appreciation for the big things. But we'd learned to fight fair, to ask for help when we needed it, to prioritize our relationship even when it felt like everything else was more urgent. We hired a nanny 3 days a week so we could both maintain our careers. We scheduled date nights like medical appointments, non-negotiable time for just the two of us. We took turns getting up with Elena at night so neither of us bore the entire burden alone. Slowly, we found our rhythm as a family. Elena grew into a curious, fearless toddler who inherited Vivian's determination and my stubborn streak. She loved books and building blocks, and the sound of her own voice echoing in empty spaces. She would sit quietly during our video conferences, coloring in her corner of whatever room we were working in. On her second birthday, we threw a party in our backyard. Mom and Frank came, along with Vivian's parents, my team from work, and several of Vivian's colleagues. Watching our daughter blow out her candles, surrounded by people who loved us both, I felt a contentment I'd never experienced before. This was what happiness looked like. Not the desperate intensity of young love, but the steady satisfaction of a life built with intention and care. That night, after the guests had left and Elena was asleep, Vivian and I sat on our back porch with glasses of wine, watching fireflies dance in the garden.
"Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together the first time?" she asked.
"Sometimes," I said, "but I think we needed to become who we are now before we could build something lasting." She nodded, leaning against my shoulder. "I used to be angry about the lost years," she said. "All the time we wasted apart, all the experiences we didn't share. But now I think those years were necessary. We both needed to learn who we were independently, before we could be truly equal partners." I thought about the boy who'd taken her father's money out of fear and desperation, about the girl who'd spent 8 years trying to become someone else's version of perfect, about the long journey that had brought us back to each other as fully realized adults. "Besides," she added with a smile, "if we'd stayed together, we might have gotten complacent, taken each other for granted. This way, we know exactly how precious what we have is." She was right. Every day with her felt like a gift rather than an expectation. Every small gesture of love carried weight because we both remembered what it was like to live without it. Elena started preschool when she turned 3. She was shy at first, clinging to Vivian's leg during drop-off, but quickly made friends with her characteristic determination. Her teacher said she was bright and creative, always asking questions and coming up with elaborate stories during playtime. One afternoon, she came home with a drawing of our family, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney. At the bottom, in her careful preschool handwriting, she'd written, "My happy family." I hung it on the refrigerator next to her other artwork, but that particular drawing made me pause. Happy family, such simple words, but they represented everything I'd thought was lost forever. Work continued to thrive for both of us. Our medical gaming applications were being used in children's hospitals across the country. Vivian's research had led to several breakthrough surgical techniques that were saving lives worldwide. We'd found a way to pursue our individual passions while building something meaningful together. But our greatest success was the life we'd created at home. Sunday morning pancakes with Elena helping to mix the batter. Family bike rides through the neighborhood. Reading bedtime stories in the rocking chair Frank had made. Simple moments that felt miraculous because we'd fought so hard to achieve them. When Elena turned 4, she started asking questions about how Vivian and I had met. We told her an age-appropriate version, that we'd known each other when we were very young, had to be apart for a while to grow up, and then found each other again when we were ready to build a family together. "Like in the fairy tales?" she asked. "Sort of," Vivian said, "but better, because it's real." Elena seemed satisfied with this explanation. She liked the idea that her parents had chosen each other twice, that their love was strong enough to survive separation and time. On our 5th anniversary of getting back together, Vivian surprised me with a gift I hadn't expected, a small velvet box that contained the promise ring I'd given her when we were teenagers. "I kept it," she said simply. "Through medical school, through my marriage, through the divorce. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I'd assumed she'd gotten rid of it years ago, along with everything else that reminded her of our first relationship." "It wasn't worth much," I said, examining the small diamond that had seemed so significant when I was 19. "It was worth everything," she said. It was the first time someone loved me for who I was, instead of who they wanted me to become. That night, I asked her to marry me properly. Not with the desperate urgency of youth, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned what real partnership looked like. We were already committed to each other in every way that mattered, but making it official felt important. A public declaration that we'd chosen each other not just once, but over and over again through all the challenges life had thrown at us. The wedding was small, immediate family, close friends, and Elena as our flower girl in a white dress she'd picked out herself. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising not just to love each other, but to keep choosing each other even when it was difficult. Mom cried through the entire ceremony. Frank walked Vivian down the aisle since her father was still recovering from another minor heart episode. Her parents beamed from the front row, finally seeing their daughter truly happy. During the reception, Elena made a toast in her 4-year-old way, standing on a chair and declaring that she was glad her mommy and daddy loved each other so much. The entire room melted. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Elena was asleep, Vivian and I danced slowly in our living room to the same song that had been playing in the coffee shop the day we reconnected. "This is what I always imagined," she said, her head resting on my shoulder. "What?" "This feeling of completeness. Like all the broken pieces have finally been put back together in the right order." I knew exactly what she meant. For years, I'd felt like I was living a partial life, successful but somehow incomplete. Now, holding her in our home with our daughter sleeping upstairs, I felt whole in a way I'd never experienced before. 2 years later, we welcomed our son, Michael. He was born 3 weeks early during a snowstorm that shut down half the city. I had to drive through blizzard conditions to get Vivian to the hospital, white-knuckling the steering wheel while she timed contractions in the passenger seat. He came into the world quickly and loudly, demanding attention from his first breath. Elena was fascinated by her baby brother, constantly wanting to help feed him, change his diapers, and sing him songs she made up on the spot. Our family felt complete. The business continued to grow. We'd expanded beyond medical applications into educational games that help children with learning disabilities, therapeutic tools for adults recovering from trauma, and accessibility software that made technology more inclusive. We were making a real difference in the world, but more importantly, we were doing it together. Every success felt shared. Every challenge felt manageable because we faced it as a team. When Elena started first grade, she wrote a report about her family for a school assignment. She described me as someone who made games that helped people feel better, and Vivian as a doctor who fixed children's hearts. But the part that made us both tear up was her conclusion. "My parents love each other very much, and they love me and my brother too. They show us that families can be happy even when things are hard." Out of the mouths of babes. Now, 15 years after we reconnected in that coffee shop, I can say with certainty that some things are worth fighting for. Some loves are strong enough to survive separation, time, and the mistakes we make when we're too young to know better. Vivian and I are different people than we were at 19. We're calmer, more secure, better at communicating. We've learned that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day, a commitment to showing up for each other even when it's inconvenient or difficult. We face challenges that would have destroyed our younger selves, career pressures, parenting struggles, family illnesses, financial stress, but we face them together, as equal partners who trust each other completely. Sometimes I think about that boy who took a check from Vivian's father and convinced himself he was protecting the girl he loved. I understand why he made that choice, even though I wish he'd been braver. Sometimes the long way around is the only way to get where you need to be. Elena is 9 now. Michael is 7, and they're growing up in a house full of love and laughter and the occasional argument about whose turn it is to load the dishwasher. They take for granted that their parents adore each other, that families work through problems together, that love is something you can count on. I hope they never have to learn how rare and precious that really is. Vivian and I often talk about the parallel universe where we stayed together the first time, where we fumbled through young adulthood together, making mistakes and learning from them side by side. Sometimes that life seems appealing in its simplicity, but I wouldn't trade the life we actually built. The one where we both became whole people independently before choosing to become a family. The one where our love is based on respect and admiration, rather than just chemistry and need. The one where we know exactly how much we have to lose, and we guard it accordingly. Last week, I found Elena reading one of the old newspaper clippings my mom had saved about my company's early success. She looked up at me with Vivian's dark eyes and asked, "Dad, what does it mean that you dated someone out of your league?" I'd forgotten that phrase was in the headline of the article. I sat down beside her and thought carefully about my answer. "It means I was lucky enough to fall in love with someone amazing, even though I didn't think I deserved her," I said finally. "But I learned that love isn't about leagues or deserving. It's about two people choosing to build something beautiful together." She nodded solemnly, filing this information away for future reference. "Are you still out of Mom's league?" she asked. I smiled, thinking about all the ways Vivian and I have grown together, all the challenges we've overcome, all the dreams we've achieved side by side. "No," I said. "Now we're exactly where we both belong." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it.